Level 1, Junior PE Analyst. The data room opens at 9 a.m. Hundreds of documents, financials, supplier contracts, headcount reports, legal folders you will not finish today. Somewhere inside all of it is a packaging company in the Midwest with 2,300 employees and a founder whose name is still on the building. That part matters less here than it would anywhere else. What matters is the margin. EBITDA is 11.4%. The sector runs closer to 14. That gap is why your firm is interested. Around here, that gap has a name: opportunity. Your job is to build the model, not to understand the company the way its employees understand it, through routines, customers, delays, and relationships built over years. You understand it through outputs: revenue per employee, gross margin by line, working capital, debt capacity. You are learning to read a business like a structure, not a story. The office is quieter than Wall Street. No panic, no shouting, just clean conference rooms, low voices, and the kind of silence that usually surrounds expensive decisions. You stay late almost every night, not because anyone asks, because if the model is wrong, you are wrong. And in private equity, mistakes do not arrive loudly. They sit in the room, then they damage your credibility. A few weeks in, something shifts. You are deep in the headcount tab, looking at departments, tenure, compensation, and regional labor cost. At some point, without even noticing when it happened, you stop seeing employees. You start seeing a number that can move. You do not pause on that thought. You just keep working. That is the first real lesson. Not the jargon, not the spreadsheets, the reframe. A company is no longer a living thing built by people. It is an asset with cash flows, inefficiencies, and a future owner. And you have already started looking at it that way. Level 2, Deal Associate. The deal has a code name, Project Falcon, not the company's real name. That stays outside the room until the papers are signed. Inside, it is just Falcon, cleaner, easier to model, easier to discuss, easier to detach from. A business in Ohio becomes a set of margins, debt terms, and exit assumptions. You're building the LBO model now, not learning the theory anymore, using it: purchase price, leverage, interest burden, downside case, exit in year 5. The structure has to feel aggressive enough to produce returns, but stable enough to survive scrutiny. That balance is the job. You run scenario after scenario. Revenue softens, rates move, margins tighten. The company still has to carry what will be placed on top of it. That is the quiet trick of the whole thing. The target does not just get acquired, it absorbs the weight of its own acquisition. The investment committee deck is dense, polished, and calm. You built most of it. On the day of the meeting, you sit near the wall, not the table, close enough to answer, far enough to understand your place. The partners ask about management, lender appetite, covenant pressure. Whether this company can handle a future it did not choose. Nobody speaks dramatically. Nobody has to. The deal gets approved. What you feel is not pride. It is access. You did not create a company, improve a product, or invent anything useful. You helped build the case for buying control, loading the structure correctly, and turning the next 5 years into a return profile. And for the first time, that feels less like analysis and more like power. Level 3, Portfolio Associate. The deal closed 6 weeks ago. Now you're inside it. You fly to Ohio on a Monday morning with a senior associate and someone from the operations team. The company's CFO meets you at the airport. He has been there for 11 years. Polite, controlled, careful. You can see him trying to figure out what your presence means for him, for the management team, for the people below them. You smile and use the approved language: value creation, operational improvement, strategic alignment. Everyone hears the words. Everyone understands the threat underneath them. The board meeting is on Tuesday. The reporting package is thick, polished, and heavy with numbers: revenue, margins, capex, headcount, performance by segment. You helped prepare it. But the numbers are not the real point. The point is the gap between current EBITDA and the version the model promised. That gap now has a dashboard attached to it. Procurement savings, pricing actions, facility consolidation, headcount efficiency. Everything is tracked. Everything is color-coded. Green means movement. Red means explanation. Every week, the fund wants more green and less friction. This is where private equity stops feeling abstract. You are suddenly in operating reviews, HR discussions, and planning calls where the language stays polite while the meaning gets sharper. How do we keep output flat and labor lower? Which teams are heavy? Which managers are replaceable? Where loyalty becomes expensive. At one meeting, an operations director walks you through a process improvement plan he clearly spent weeks building. It is thoughtful, specific, earned the hard way. You ask questions, you take notes, you thank him for the work. Later, on a slide, you flag his function as overstaffed relative to benchmark. That is the shift at this level. You are no longer analyzing a company from a distance. You are sitting across from the people who will absorb the model, and little by little, you stop seeing the contradiction. Level 4, Operating Vice President. You never arrive as bad news. The introduction is always polished, a short bio, a careful title. Operating Vice President, Value Creation. You're here to support management, improve performance, accelerate execution. The language is clean enough to calm a boardroom. No one inside the company believes it. You see it immediately in the way meetings change when you enter. People prepare more carefully. Casual conversations disappear. Numbers get tighter. The CFO starts copying you on decisions that used to stay local. You do not need to threaten anyone. Your presence already does that. The first site visit is a manufacturing plant in Pennsylvania. Old building, aging equipment, 300 employees across 2 shifts. The plant manager walks you through the floor with the pride of someone who actually knows how the place works. Every machine, every bottleneck, every improvised fix that kept production moving when the budget did not. You listen. You ask sharp questions. You take notes. Later, in the deck, the same plant becomes something else. Underutilized capacity, elevated labor cost, delayed maintenance, footprint inefficiency. The recommendation slide is calm, professional, and deadly. Consolidation, restructuring, workforce reduction. A few weeks later, the facility is marked for closure. You are not the one delivering the message. That part stays with management. Your role is cleaner than that. You make the decision legible. You turn disruption into a recommendation, loss into a margin improvement. By now, that no longer feels indirect. That is the shift at this level. You are no longer tracking the model from inside a board pack. You are walking into real places, meeting real people, and translating their future into operational language the fund can act on. On the flight back, you review the updated EBITDA forecast. The numbers look better. The story is tighter. The case is easier to defend. You open the next deck. Level 5. Principal. You are not executing anymore. You are selecting. That is the real difference. At every level below this one, someone handed you a company and you worked on it. Now you decide which companies even deserve attention, which move forward, which die in the first minute because the margins are too thin, the debt case is weak, or the exit is not clean enough. Deals come in constantly. Founder-owned businesses, distressed assets, companies with stable cash flow and obvious inefficiencies. You read them fast, not as living businesses first, but as structures, entry multiple, debt capacity, margin expansion, exit path. What can be tightened, combined, sold, or repriced? This is the level where instinct starts to look like authority. You sit in early meetings and decide whether a company is a platform, a tuck-in, or a pass. Whether management can stay. Whether the founder is useful during transition or better removed after closing. You do not say it that bluntly in the room, but that is how the room thinks. Founder meetings reveal the shift most clearly. You sit across from someone who spent 20 years building a real business. They talk about loyalty, culture, reputation, the people who helped them survive bad years. They want a partner who understands what they built and where it should go next. You say the right things, calm things, respectful things. What you do not say is that inside your framework, their company is already becoming something else, a platform for consolidation, a margin story, a future exit. Their legacy may matter to them. To you, it matters only if it helps the transaction hold together. That is the change at this level. You no longer wait for a business to enter the machine. You choose what enters, what gets reshaped, and what gets left behind. And the colder your judgment becomes, the more valuable it starts to look. Level 6. Partner. You vote now. That is the clearest difference. Every major capital decision passes through the investment committee, and you are at the table. When a deal is approved, when a portfolio company gets more time, when an exit begins, your view carries weight. By now, you are looking across the whole portfolio at once, not as separate businesses, but as positions with different levels of risk, timing, and return potential. You know which companies are on plan, which are slipping, and which ones are being described too politely by the people closest to them. On investment committee days, the room stays calm, a portfolio review, a clean deck, a management story that sounds mostly intact. Then one question changes the temperature. Customer concentration, missed pricing, a covenant issue buried 3 slides deep. You do not need to raise your voice. At this level, pressure travels quietly. That is part of what changed. You are no longer reacting to the facts. You are testing the version of reality other people are trying to present to you. The other shift happens with exits. One company is nearing the end of its hold period. You review the options. Sell it, recapitalize it, hold longer, and hope the story improves. The team models outcomes. The cleanest return is a sale, so that becomes the recommendation. The company has hundreds of employees, a management team that wants more time, and a future that will look very different depending on who buys it next. None of that appears in the core logic. That is the level. You are no longer choosing companies or fixing them. You are allocating patience, pressure, and capital across a portfolio, then translating those choices into language clean enough for the committee and calm enough for the LPs. And the higher you rise, the easier it becomes to describe an entire business as one line in a return story. Level 7. Fund power layer. The portfolio is a map now, not a collection of businesses, a spread of positions, different sectors, different timelines, different leverage profiles, different exit windows. You no longer think about most of them by name. You think about hold period, downside risk, buyer appetite, and how each asset fits the fund's return story. That is the final shift. Earlier in your career, you still felt some connection to the business underneath the model, the product, the employees, the management team trying to hold things together. At this level, those details fade into background noise. What stays in focus is yield, timing, structure, and control. Your real audience now is capital. LP meetings make that clear. Pension funds, sovereign capital, endowments, family offices. They do not come to you for products, services, or culture. They come to you for performance. You are not presenting companies. You are presenting outcomes, discipline, and the promise that capital placed in your hands will return larger and cleaner. Even the CEOs feel different now. They prepare for your calls, rehearse their language, smooth out the weak spots before they speak. You listen, but mostly for signals. Delay risk, margin pressure, exit readiness. Whether the asset is still useful in its current form, a distressed opportunity comes across the table. The numbers work. The structure is attractive. The business itself barely matters. What matters is timeline, recoverability, and whether the asset can be turned into a cleaner return than the one before it. That is what this level does to you. You stop seeing companies as companies. They become containers for cash flow, leverage, and timing. People still work inside them. Customers still depend on them. Whole lives still move through them. But from up here, all of that becomes secondary to structure. And that is why this level feels like the top from the outside. Because from the inside, it is where almost everything human has finally disappeared. And that is the final truth of it. The loop does not end when you reach the top. It only gets quieter. New capital comes in. New companies enter the machine. New people learn to call extraction strategy and distance discipline. The system keeps going, with or without your name on the door.